Today in the episode, 6 units of Russian anti-aircraft missile systems in 48 hours. Ukraine intensifies fighting. Trump says Putin is more ready to end the war than Zelenskyy. But what does real so-called Russian peace mean? Ukrainian parliament appointed digital transformation minister Mikhailo Fedorov as new defense minister. How it affects Ukrainian army? Chemical plant in Stavropol Krai that supplies components for explosives for Russian army was hit last night. It is hit for the second time during last month. Such attacks are efforts to reduce the Russia's offensive potential and its ability to conduct missile and bomb attacks on Ukraine. The plant is a critically important element of the Russian defense industrial base, with a capacity of over 1 million tons of ammonia and up to 1.4 million tons of ammonium nitrate per year, making it one of the key suppliers of basic components for explosives and ammunition production. A power outage occurred in the Russian city of Orsk after an explosion at a substation. Orsk residents are reporting large-scale blackout, cell phone service outages, and internet outages on social media. There are also no heating in the city, where it is minus 22 degrees Celsius. The power outages occurred almost simultaneously in all areas of the city. Local authorities, as usual, hide the real reason of blackout. Pilots of the unmanned systems forces in 48 hours hit 6 units of Russian anti-aircraft missile systems and radar stations in the territories of temporarily occupied Donetsk and Zaporizhia regions. This was reported by the commander Robert Madyar Bravdi. The depth of the hits was up to 160 kilometers from the front, with a warhead weighing more than 10 kilograms. This, according to Madyar, leaves no chance for the future combat capability of the Russian army. An end to Russia's war against Ukraine is closer than ever, but the final steps will be the hardest, U.S. Ambassador to NATO Matthew Whitaker said. He noted that talks are now focused on a detailed proposal and have entered a decisive phase. Whitaker compared the moment to the final seconds of an American football game, saying the toughest challenge comes at the very last yard.
I think we're as close as we've ever been. I've said that several times. There is a legitimate proposal on the table that I think there's we're very close. We just need to close the deal. Obviously, this last, just like in football, that last yard in the red zone is the hardest. I think this is, the same idea. I think this last yard is going to be hard, but I feel good. If we don't get this done, and the killing continues.
And suddenly, in a new interview, Donald Trump said he believes Putin is ready to end the invasion of Ukraine. He added that in his view, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has been more reserved. At the same time, when Trump was asked why U.S.-led talks have not yet resolved Europe's largest conflict since World War II, Trump gave a brief answer, saying, Zelenskyy.
I think Putin is ready to make a deal. I think Ukraine is less ready to make a deal. Donald Trump, President of the United States, in an exclusive interview to Reuters.
When Donald Trump answers Zelenskyy, it raises a key question. What does that mean? It refers to President Zelenskyy refusing to accept Russia's terms. And Ukrainians have already known what those terms mean in real life. In the Bucha district alone, by mid-2022, investigators recovered 1,316 bodies killed by Russian troops. More than 140 people are still listed as missing. These are only confirmed cases, and investigations are still ongoing as new evidence continues to emerge. Russia's occupation also means the kidnapping of civilians. From temporarily occupied Ukrainian territories, Russia has taken civilians and forcibly conscripted thousands of Ukrainians into its army. Human rights groups say men are detained, threatened, and left with no real choice. Analysts note that similar patterns of violence and terror have been seen before, from Soviet-era campaigns to Russia's actions in Afghanistan and Syria. For Ukraine, rejecting Russia's demands is framed as a matter of survival, not diplomacy. Western governments warn that if Russia is not stopped in Ukraine, it will continue testing its ability to use force, pressure, and intimidation against other countries. And the last point, if Putin is ready to sign a peace deal, then why does Russia attack civilians and energy infrastructure in Ukraine every day in freezing winter conditions? So, the question is without answer. Meanwhile, negotiations are ongoing. At the end of January, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the U.S. President's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, may travel to Moscow for talks with Putin, Bloomberg reports. According to the publication, during his visit to the Kremlin, Witkoff intends to present the Russian dictator with a new version of the Ukraine peace plan, which, according to the White House, is 90% complete. More in our next story.
The visit of U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff to Moscow at the end of January will be the 7th in the past year. It is expected that the subject of negotiations with the Russian side will be the peace plan to end the war in Ukraine. Whether Witkoff will meet Putin personally is not yet known. Recall that the previous meeting in Russia in December 2025 yielded no results. In addition, many questions remain regarding the peace plan itself. In particular, the main unresolved issue is territorial.
The Kremlin continues to insist on transferring the entire territory of Donetsk and Luhansk regions under its control, while Kyiv wants to freeze the front line and create a buffer zone with the withdrawal of both Russian and Ukrainian troops. Moscow also categorically opposes the deployment of NATO military forces in Ukraine, which should become a key element of Western security guarantees. The fate of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest in Europe, which before the war provided almost 20% of all electricity in Ukraine, as well as $300 billion in Russia's central bank reserves, remains unclear, from a publication by the Moscow Times on Telegram.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy stated that he has instructed the negotiation team on contacts with the American side to finalize the document on security guarantees for Ukraine from the United States in the coming 2 weeks.
This must be a document of historical level, and that is exactly the level the text is reaching now. We understand that the American side is in communication with Russia regarding the basic political framework for ending the war. We have formulated our vision, and there must be clear feedback from Russia on whether they are ready to end the war on real terms. If there is no such readiness, pressure on the aggressor must continue to intensify. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, President of Ukraine, on Telegram.
In the EU, they support Kyiv's position to intensify pressure on Russia. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas stated that the EU's 20th sanctions package against Russia will be ready already in February.
President Trump is not alone to detest war. Ukrainians do, we all do. But as we see time and again, this push remains totally one-sided. Every week, Russian bombs plunge Ukrainian cities into darkness. Destruction and death are Russia's answer to diplomacy. The bitter reality is that this war might carry on for a long time unless we collectively put more pressure on Russia to stop it.
Ukraine continues peace negotiations together with European and American partners. On January 6, 2026 in Paris, a meeting of the Coalition of the Willing at the level of leaders took place, following which Kyiv, Paris, and London signed a declaration of intent to deploy a Western contingent on Ukrainian territory. Later, on the 7th of January in France, the Ukrainian delegation met with the American one. After that, President Zelenskyy stated that the American peace plan is agreed upon 90%. The Ukrainian leader discussed anti-Russian sanctions and security guarantees with U.S. Senators Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal. Recall that Graham has already stated that Donald Trump gave the green light to the sanctions bill, which provides for the introduction of 500% duties on imports of goods into the United States from countries that purchase Russian oil, petroleum products, natural gas, or uranium.
This will be well-timed, as Ukraine is making concessions for peace and Putin is all talk, continuing to kill the innocent. This bill would give President Trump tremendous leverage against countries like China, India, and Brazil to incentivize them to stop buying the cheap Russian oil that provides the financing for Putin's bloodbath against Ukraine. Lindsey Graham, U.S. Senator on X.
Already next week, Kyiv's allies in the G7 will meet with the U.S. President Donald Trump in Davos. On the agenda, security guarantees for Ukraine after a ceasefire, as well as discussion of a new agreement between Ukraine and the United States known as the Prosperity Plan. It provides for attracting about $800 billion over 10 years for Ukraine's reconstruction and economic development. Reported by Yulia Hranovska, UATV News.
Ukrainian parliament appointed Digital Transformation Minister Mikhailo Fedorov as new defense minister. He has created DIA, Portal of Digital Services, so-called state in a smartphone. Ukraine has become the 5th country in the world in terms of the level of development of digital public services, and the first with digital passports that have legal force, and all of this during full-scale invasion. Fedorov has played a key role in shaping Ukraine's high-tech response to Russia's invasion. In particular, he helped improve connectivity for Ukraine's forces at the front line by deploying Starlink terminals. His Ministry of Digital Transformation has created Army of Drones, complex development and provision of the armed forces of Ukraine with unmanned aerial vehicles. Fedorov was also instrumental in creating a so-called drone line, a defensive line of drones meant to inflict maximum damage on Russian troops. Fedorov said that his reforms as Minister of Defense would focus on digitizing the army, increasing the use of drones and artificial intelligence. And ex-Minister of Defense Denis Shmyhal was appointed as a new Minister of Energy. He stated that his key task in office is to get through the acute phase of the energy crisis as quickly as possible. In particular, reconstitution of substations and protection of energy objects. Shmyhal headed Energy Ministry amid massive Russian attacks. President of Ukraine notes that he thanks Shmyhal for his systematic work in the Ministry of Defense and for activating processes to protect Ukraine. Zelenskyy stressed that the same systematic approach is needed for the energy sector. It will help to quickly restore facilities after Russian strikes and ensure the stable development of the industry. That's all for today's News Digest. Stay informed, stay critical, like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.